Welcome to Freewheeling. I'm Siddharth Vinayak Partnkar, and joining us today we have a special guest all the way from Goodwood, yes, home to Rolls-Royce motor cars. And this is a special moment because, unlike what happens in the automobile industry, where once every few years you celebrate the launch of a new model, with Rolls-Royce, it's very different. It's not just a new model, it's not something that happens very regularly. And so, seeing a new generation of the Ghost, a really popular nameplate for the brand, well, like I said, very special. And joining us today is Jonathan Sims, who is the man responsible for this car, the chief engineer for this new generation. John, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you.
No problem at all. It's a pleasure to be with you. And as you say, a momentous occasion for us. It has Ghost has been the most successful car that we've launched in the Goodwood era, and so this is certainly a big moment.
Oh, absolutely. And I can tell you that even the run up to it, of course, if things had been different, I know that there would have been a very different approach to that. And but having said that, there was a lot of anticipation. And the reason I think in this particular case is that it kind of goes beyond being what people expect from a Rolls-Royce. Let me explain what I mean, because everything Rolls-Royce is about, super luxury. It's about a different kind of lifestyle. But with the Ghost, we also got a fantastic driver's car. And so to make sure that the new one sort of, bests that benchmark, was it a tough challenge?
It was indeed a tough challenge, and as you mentioned, Sid, what we found with the previous Ghost was that our customers absolutely loved it. And of course, from the perspective of an engineer, it's very easy to work through a list of things that you need to fix. It's much more challenging when you're trying to replace a product where the majority of your customer base is saying, actually, don't change too much. And so actually that was a big challenge for us. But actually what we found with the architecture of luxury that we now have in the Ghost as well, we were able to integrate four-wheel drive and four-wheel steer, and also, of course, the aluminium architecture. And those three factors, amongst others, have, we believe, really moved Ghost on now and made that incremental improvement in terms of its dynamic personality.
So what for you then becomes the one or maybe two standout differences between the previous car and this one?
I think the four-wheel steering has really made quite a dramatic difference to the dynamic behavior of the vehicle. So, for example, when you're driving, maybe you're driving and making a high-speed lane change on a motorway, or you're driving more on twisting B roads. And on these type of environments, you really notice that although the car, of course, is still a large car, it's still a luxurious car, so it's still relatively heavy. You notice with the four-wheel steering that we've really managed to minimize that feeling of weight transfer onto the back axle that you do experience with some larger luxury vehicles. So I think for me that has made the biggest dynamic impact. The other impact, if you like, that I really notice inside the car is the dashboard. The design of the dashboard, you may well have seen it, Sid, from the press pictures. It's really a cleaned up version, a modernized version of the previous Ghost. It's sort of evolutionary, and yet it's still very fresh and very modern. And for me, when I'm sitting inside the car, I absolutely love that cleaned up layout. So I think those two things, if you like, one dynamic, one visual. And of course, on the dashboard as well, we have our fantastic new Ghost panel, the rear illuminated panel. And that has really made a huge difference in terms of that.
Oh, very individual as well, that style element.
Yes.
And I have to say that I want to talk about both those aspects with you more now, the dynamic and the visual. Speaking of the dynamic first, though, I can't help myself, I think. When you were talking about twisty B roads, by the way, I had kind of drifted off because I now just want to drive the car. But the four-wheel steering.
That's what we hoped you'd want to do, Sid.
I definitely do. And, I think the reason is because the kind of benchmark that I was talking about that the previous car set, it was such a surprise to see the car being so dynamic. And this is now years ago that we're talking about. So obviously, you've got so much more technology and development at hand today. And yet that car was just, an absolute revelation to drive because you don't expect it to perform that way. Coming from there, When you speak about the four-wheel steering, the effect typically is that it kind of shortens the wheelbase in a sense, right? So that's the sense you get as a driver. Um, what of the actual wheelbase is different from the last car? I mean, talk us through like the dimensions.
So the dimensions, just so I get them right, I've got them in front of me here. So the dimensions now, we are 218 inches. On the previous vehicle, we were 215. So we're slightly longer. In terms of the width, it's really only an inch wider. So in terms of the passenger compartment, it's very similar in terms of space, but we have within that incorporated more sound insulation into the sides of the vehicle as well. So you will experience, in terms of interior space, a fairly similar feeling to the previous Ghost. But I think what you notice from the outside of the car is on the front of the vehicle, we've given the car, we say here, a more sort of assured personality. So we've just raised the tip of the front wings, and you notice this very distinct sort of crease line. The designers talk a lot about this being inspired by yachts. So you have this almost bow line down the front of the wing. And that, coupled with this very distinctive, now very cleaned up Pantheon grille, the car, although it's a similar size, when you stand in front of it, has a much more sort of assured personality. So it looks actually quite a bit larger physically than the previous Ghost.
And what about the wheelbase? Is there a difference there, or is that similar?
No, the wheelbase is exactly the same as the previous model. So yeah, it stays at 130 inches, and yeah, that's the same as the previous Ghost.
Now, speaking of that face and getting into the styling element of it, yes, you're right. It instantly, at least in the pictures like you mentioned that I have seen, it seems more imposing and it seems a little bit more upright for sure.
Yes.
You've already explained why that is, but what's the reaction you're getting to that? And what was the initial reaction internally as well when you presented this?
The reaction, I've been very privileged to, over the last few weeks, have the opportunity to actually meet some of our clients here at the home of Rolls-Royce. Obviously, due to the current restrictions, we created a small closed room viewing area here at the home of Rolls-Royce, and this enabled us to do socially distanced viewings with clients and potential clients. And actually, from my point of view, having been involved with the product for a while now, I'm watching clients' faces very carefully when we take them into the room. And I think one particular client, for me, really hit the nail on the head. And he, after we'd unveiled the car, he loved it. And he said to us, the best compliment I can pay you is it's exactly what I expected. And I think that's really what we were after, that actually if our clients imagined what the Ghost or what a Rolls-Royce would look like now for the next 10 years, as you probably know, Sid, from the majority of our client base, they're not after us reinventing the wheel every 2 years and coming out with a dramatic new style. They love the brand for this sort of understated elegance to it. And that is the feedback from the clients has been that it's exactly what they were looking for. It looks more modern. It looks fresh. It looks self-assured in terms of its personality, but at the same time, it's not over the top. And it seems that we've really got it right with the styling.
Now, when you have a car that is, the epitome of luxury to begin with, I mean, or the brand itself stands for that, and you have so much bespoke content that goes into these vehicles for the different customers who you attract. Given that sort of level of, sheer comfort and materials that are already, going into these cars, just from that aspect, and especially in the back, how do you try and sort of bring something new? Because in the front, you've explained the dash has a completely different sort of a look. There's also the use of technology with the backlit paneling, but in the back seat, what's like that one standout feature?
Well, I think, Sid, maybe just to touch on something you mentioned there, when we were working on New Ghost, we realized that in today's market, there's an awful lot being thrown at customers in the automotive segment, some of which they want and some of which they don't. And actually, what we realized with Ghost was, for many of our customers, they lead very busy, very tech-heavy lives, where they're always on, they're always having interactions. And actually, the overwhelming theme that kept coming through was, for them, their Ghost was almost a place of sanctuary, if you like. It was their sort of peace and quiet. They step out of a busy office, they're on their way to a conference or whatever else it may be, and when they close that door, that's their sort of haven of peace. And so we realized that what we needed to do was actually, rather than concentrate only on features, to really concentrate on the presentation and the purity of the materials in the car. And so that's why you'll notice that really, rather than shout about any particular feature, what we've done in the car is, again, I'll come back to this sort of idea of cleaning up. So when you look inside the car, you notice now the door panels, the seats, everything, there's very few stitch lines to visually interrupt what you're seeing. And that's taken a tremendous amount of effort in terms of iterations of seats by our team here in the leather shop, by the way that the open pore veneers are now produced by our woodshop colleagues here. So we've really concentrated on trying to bring the purity of materials forward, so that when you sit in the car, what you actually want to do is run your hand across those uninterrupted leather surfaces, and as you see the wood grain just recessed slightly into the door there, with it now being open pore, you can actually feel the grain in the wood. It's beautifully tactile. And so the materials are one thing that really come to the front, Sid, but I know that's not quite what you were asking me. But in terms of the features, we haven't quite deliberately, we haven't thrown lots of new technical features in. You will, of course, notice that we have the Starburst headliner, we have rear seat entertainment, and that's another example. Rather than putting lots and lots of new features into the rear seat entertainment, actually, we've almost gone the other way. That we've stepped back and we've said, actually, what the feedback from our clients is, they have all the technology they need in their smartphones. And actually, when it comes to the connection to the car, they want something that's very clean, very simple to use, and concentrates just on those features where they have a meaningful interaction with the car. So with the audio system, with the navigation system, etc. So I think, Sid, my answer to your question, which you might accuse me of being around the houses answer, is that what will stand out to our clients is we've taken everything that was there and just cleaned it up, made it fresher, made it simpler, and brought the purity of materials to the fore.
I actually loved your answer, because I was almost visualizing it as you were saying it, even though, when you see the pictures, it's all kind of flat, but you're making me definitely want to now run my hand on the leather and on the wood, that's for sure. So
Excellent.
Coming back to the point that I can't wait to drive it and get into it,
Absolutely.
but I think that's great, actually, because it is a very valid point that you make, that there is almost too much going on in vehicles today. The sky is the limit when it comes to how much technology you want to throw in, and how much it can do. But trying to keep it subtle, or trying to make sure that it is just what people need. I actually, that resonates well with me. So, given that, with the temptation to throw in all kinds of effects with ambient lighting, or with sound, or anything that's visual or auditory, was this a conscious effort from the entire team to sort of hold back because there was a plan at the start, or does it become a combination of that and, like you said, customer feedback?
No, we were very definitely connected to the customer feedback. So we're fortunate here at Rolls-Royce that we have, compared to many manufacturers, a relatively small global network of dealers who are very well connected to us here at the home of Rolls-Royce. And also, we regularly have direct contact with customers. I was saying the other day, I can't imagine many other car companies where somebody in my position, so being based in the production facility, would have those opportunities to meet face to face and have, if you like, unfettered conversation with current owners, so that we can really find out what they love, where they would like improvements, where they would like modernization, where they wouldn't. And so that really is something that's able to inform that feedback that we put into product development. But to answer your question, Sid, yes, taking a step back from some of those features was a very deliberate effort. There were some, of course, new features that we brought in, and I wouldn't in any way like to give the impression it's not a high-tech car. It is. We have radar cruise control. We have night vision. We have, as I mentioned, four-wheel drive, four-wheel steering. Depending on the markets, we have features like the Apple CarPlay. So there is the technology in the car, but I think what we've concentrated on is that technology is not there unless you want it to be there, and that's what I love. If you want to, and the guys have driven many development miles in the car, and sometimes actually you just want to get in the car and drive, and actually being able to press one start-stop button, you don't even take your hand off the wheel to engage gear, and then you drive off. And if you want to, that's all you need to touch. And that's really what we've concentrated on. Everything's there, but it's not there until the client wants it. And that's really something that we very deliberately have done. Even things like our now very iconic fold-away picnic tables. The screens are tucked away unless the client wants them. So you can have a car where there's almost zero technology visible if you want to, or you can have, of course, rear seat entertainment on. You can have interactivity with the front screen. You've got touch screen functions if you want it, but if not, you can use a traditional analog controller. So, we've really worked, Sid, on trying to make it so the technology is only there when the client wants to interact with it.
No, that sounds very clean, and I like the sound of that, to be honest. The question I have next for you is the car faster than the last one? Is it lighter than the last one? And, how is it safer than the last one?
So, okay, in terms of performance, it's slightly faster than the previous car, only by about 0.2 seconds, 0 to 60 or 0 to 100 kph. The weight of the car is actually slightly heavier. And you might say, well, how is that when you've integrated an aluminium architecture? Well, of course, as you can imagine, the hardware to bringing a four-wheel drive and four-wheel steering has a significant weight to it. And also, really, what we did with this car was we didn't allow so much the weight targets to be the priority over the acoustic targets. So we knew that we wanted to make the car a step forward in terms of the harmony of the acoustics. So we talk in the press release about having this sort of one note through the car, and it's very difficult to describe. But what we wanted to do was try and achieve a car where I've driven a few people in it, and I've showed them that you can drive at 50 miles an hour or 70 miles an hour, and actually although if you measured it, of course, there'd be an increase in noise level, there's no noticeable rise in noise level as you build speed. So we really wanted to make that a priority. So actually, although we have gained somewhere in the region of 100 kilograms, for me, when you hear and feel the acoustic improvements and the fact that we've integrated the hardware in the chassis, actually, I think that's still quite an achievement.
Oh, in fact, that's the reason I asked about the weight, because I was curious with these two systems going and how you've kept the weight down. Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear. But 100 kilograms is relatively lower than what I would have expected compared to the size of the car anyway. So, yeah. And like you said, it's marginally faster. It was always a safe car to begin with, but like I was asking, is there anything specific on safety that's been added on?
I couldn't say a specific feature, Sid, in terms of one additional thing, but actually, if we look at what we've done with the architecture of luxury, obviously that is now developed over some years, and so that has proven to be incredibly stiff and strong, and that gives us intrinsically a very safe backbone to the car anyway. And so then when we bring in, we've got obviously a number of safety systems which are carryover from the other models on the architecture. So the car, continues to be a safe car. There's no one specific feature, Sid, for Ghost that is new in terms of safety. It's really a development now of the other two products on the architecture.
That's a brilliant segue into my next question. I was going to ask you about that. What learnings from the previous developments on that architecture have gone into this one? And how does it all set yourself up for future development as well? What sort of flexibility and longevity do you continue to see from this architecture?
Really, for us, it's an incredibly flexible platform. It really is. We speak of it sometimes in terms of being a huge Meccano set. And it really is very much like that, because effectively we now have these kind of 4 points where we have these very stiff mounting points for our suspension system, and we are able to then take this front bulkhead section and the rear turret mounting points, and we can effectively extend or reduce the wheelbase in between those two sections to suit whichever derivative it is we want to develop next. So it really is very scalable in terms of a platform. It would also offer potential for future alternative powertrains, etc., if that's a direction that we go in. Obviously, I can't speak too much on that at the moment, but there is, so in that terms, it's scalable, and it offers really a very future-proof development possibility. What I would say, Sid, in terms of what we've learned actually that the stiffness of that platform really enables us to work on developing the suspension system rather than having to try and constantly compensate for flex or movement within the body structure. And that's actually something that sounds very simple, but of course, for many manufacturers that don't have the possibility to have a standalone architecture, they first have to learn how the actual structure that they're bolting to is moving before they can then actually concentrate on, if you like, the value added bit, which is in terms of the suspension struts and the way that system then actually behaves. So you're first having to learn what you need to compensate for, and then work out actually how you want the car to behave. And that's really been the huge benefit for us, is now being on the third derivative on that architecture. We already understand and know very well how that platform behaves. So we've been able to concentrate just on the bit that adds value and adds personality to the car, which for me, I think has really enabled us to develop a very refined product in that development period.
That actually was an eye-opener for me. I wasn't aware of that, so that sounds really interesting. It was also great hearing you say Meccano set, because I don't think most people watching would know what that is. I love that. Yeah. It's a great reference. So. It's a great reference.
They should go and get one.
They should go Google it, right? Yeah. One last area that I want to discuss is obviously the powertrain. Again, what part of that needed enhancement? I don't think there was an improvement really required, I know. But what part did you want to specifically address, and what part are you happy with now in the final product?
So the powertrain now is obviously the updated 6.75 litre powertrain, and this, in terms of hardware, is not dramatically different to the other model on the architecture, so to Cullinan, for example. But of course, again, what we knew with this, very similar to the architecture, essentially in terms of its core performance and behavior, there was nothing that we wanted to change. And so what we could then spend all of the time concentrating on was how we wanted it to perform in Ghost. So specifically getting down to the fine details of the way the engine performs in each of the specific road speeds, engine speeds, acceleration applications, etc. So the simple answer to your question, Sid, is in terms of hardware, it's new compared to previous Ghost, but it's not dramatically new compared to Cullinan. But all of the effort has then been put in terms of the actual tuning of that specific to the personality of Ghost. And actually also there's some, if you like, some minor changes in terms of air intakes with acoustics and things like that. So it's really in the detail where we've put our effort in terms of the powertrain.
So compared to the last car and then compared to the other newer cars on the architecture, would you say the same logic applies to the gearbox?
Yes,
Right.
very much so. Yeah. So we now have our satellite-aided transmission, which we've got good experience with in the other models, and so that is, as you say, Sid, that is very similar to Cullinan.
What, was it Phantom that got that first? I remember driving that. I'm trying to remember which drive that was.
We actually brought it, I believe I'm correct in saying, I'm trying to remember now back over the years, I think we actually brought that first into Dawn. So I think that came first into Dawn.
All right. Yeah, that's an interesting feature also. I remember being very blown away by it when it was new. And now we just sort of take it for granted. Okay,
Yeah,
so
right.
last question, because I know, and I think you know this from past experience, I could go on, but in the interest of our viewers as well as your time, let me ask you the last question. The difficult question, because it's someone like you who's so close to this and who has been so deeply involved. It's tough to select that one thing, but yet the one thing on the new car that you absolutely love.
Oh, that's a good question.
You could sneak in more than one.
I think the one thing I love, I haven't mentioned already, is the feature now of the effortless doors. And I love this because the nice thing with it is you don't really need to explain it to the client. And for me, that's the essence of what a Rolls-Royce should be. You shouldn't have to go through an owner's handbook or have a dealer explain it to you. It should really be that sort of intuitive, effortless assistance that actually just enables you to enjoy the feature. And with those effortless doors, when you have the opportunity to use it, Sid, you just have this feature that, as you know, with coach doors, when you pull them, you then just sort of gently push them. But with the new car, you just pull the interior handle and it moves the door open to what we call a comfort position. And then as you step out of the car, you just pull the handle, and as you go, the door just powers itself open with you. And the moment you release it, it applies the brake at that point. And it's just one of those features that once you've used it a couple of times, it feels so natural that you wonder why we haven't done it before. And that's the sort of best compliment I can pay it is, for me, if you have to explain it, you've lost the point. And it just works so intuitively that I think that's one of the features that our clients will not only love for themselves, but will also love showing to their friends and colleagues, etc., as they share their vehicles.
Can't wait to try it. Can't wait to try all of what we've spoken about. And of course, I know that most of your colleagues have seen that I tend to spend most of the time just behind the driver's seat, even though I know I'm supposed to be doing all this other stuff. But I hope that happens soon. I can't wait to see the car because, it is a new Ghost. I know it's going to be sensational and absolutely spectacular. Congratulations to you and the team for bringing it, to us. And all the very best with it.
Thank you, Sid. Pleasure to talk to you, and I'll pass on your thanks to the team.
Oh, most definitely. And I can't wait to see them and you, hopefully in person and hopefully soon.
Would be great.
All right. Thank you again.
Thanks.